I agree that he doesn't know whether McCarthy has the votes. I assume and hope that McCarthy wouldn't have made this deal without thinking he has at least a majority of his caucus. So I really am so curious to see what the initial whip count is going to look like, because that's going to be crucial over the next couple of days.
Absolutely. Hayes Brown, as always, thank you so much for being with us. Wendy, I want to pop over to you. That question stood out to me, too, right? Not so many questions about what is actually in this deal. Actually, a lot of questions about the process looking forward, kind of dovetailing on the conversation you and I were just having.
Yeah, and I mean, it is important to talk about the deal. It's really important. It will affect the way the federal government does its job over the next 2 years. But I totally understand that thinking about the debt ceiling process is critical right now. I think that there is a sharp difference between the president thinking about how he could use the 14th Amendment to effectively get rid of the debt ceiling slowly over time with a lot of with a slow and sure process that brings the courts along, that allows financial markets to be absolutely certain that any treasuries that are issued having nothing to do with, Treasury issuing, under the debt ceiling, that Treasury issuing securities over and above the debt limit, which is going to be in law, the financial markets need to be absolutely certain that those Treasury securities will not be deemed illegal. And so any kind of process that, creates a world where the U.S. Treasury is issuing securities totally ignoring the debt ceiling needs to have been done through a slow, methodical process that makes its way through the courts. That's why, but I actually think the president's talking about doing over the next year or two on that path seems pretty reasonable to me. Let's give it a try. But that is a very sharp distinction from the president, if the deal goes awry over the next couple of days, just saying, I'm going to rely on the 14th Amendment to issue Treasury securities right now, ignoring the debt ceiling, and put those securities out into financial markets and cross his fingers that there are people who want to buy those securities, even knowing that they might be deemed illegal by the courts. That is a recipe for financial market chaos.
I agree with you. There's a big distinction between those two things. Wendy Edelberg, thank you so much for staying with us, rolling with us through this breaking news. And Alicia, that brings me to you, the person who is the Democratic strategist who has done this messaging. It might have been a short set of remarks that the president offered. You and I know the amount of thought and debate that went into what it was he was going to walk out there and say to the American people. Talk to me about the decision to keep it broad, to keep it clear, to talk about the process and what happens from here on out. And then that note that he landed on that really struck me. I don't know if it stood out to you, but this idea that it is their responsibility, right? The responsibility of the president and of Congress to get this done. And sort of that little note at the end where he touted the economic success that his administration has had.
Well, we have to think about what the president just walked out of him in the White House. They were actually briefing Democratic members of Congress on the Hill around 5 o'clock. So he is probably thinking about all of the things that everyone in his party is thinking about, from moderates to progressives. And he wanted to make sure, he probably wanted to make sure he didn't say anything that he would have to backtrack on as members of Congress start debating the text over the coming days, because we know that some people may not be happy with it. But overall, to the point that he made, to the point that we're talking about, overall, this actually is a good step forward to make sure that this country pays its bills. The piece about it is this responsibility of Congress. Look, as professional messengers, the most important thing about messaging is repetition. And we have to continue to repeat that this is what Congress is supposed to do, even not hold hostage the American people in a recession in the way that the Republican Party is.